What makes a solid set in command? Now, the reason I want to talk about this, my friend, is because stories reveal truths for real life, or we can say that real life often, or stories often reflect real life, however you want to put it. But again, it's almost intrinsically related. Again, we kind of have the stories of our lives, so it's something to really think about, and how what we see in stories can teach us lessons for when we face similar situations in real life, even not the exact same situation. Again, excuse me, we can have basically whole action films, but there can still be core concepts there that are applicable for our everyday lives. Now, the thing with set demands is that they are actually kind of interesting, especially since the actual rank they hold can vary due to settings and context. Again, you can have a Strahd that has a set in command, or you can have a whole army that has a set in command. And again, this can vary based on if it's a fantasy setting, if it's real world, if it's sci-fi, whatever it is, they can all have different ranks and so forth. But the key with a set demand is that they are both in leadership while also being insubordinate to someone else. And then they have the people under them that they lead, and they have someone that they have to follow the orders of. The field isn't a level field in a sense, at least with the hierarchy structure there. But this means that they have to be able to do both roles. They have to lead and they have to follow orders. So it can be a very interesting position to think of. But all of this, of course, depends on the character's role in the actual story and who they are allowed to play off of. For example, who do they support and who do they contrast? What are their duties and their personalities? Do they basically support and act as a buffer between the leader and the rest of the crew? Or are they just another member of the crew and their role in it is almost to just be a part of this dynamic between the leader and them? And that's almost the whole story. They don't have other interactions with the crew necessarily because the leader just talks to everyone. They just have this kind of dynamic with them in particular. So it can be very different depending on what the story is about. But different ways this can play out, for example, are maybe the second command is being prepared to take their own command someday. So there's basically this mentor-mentee relationship going on. And they could even be being brought up to replace the leader after the leader gets promoted or retired or whatever. So it can be very interesting dynamic in that training of someone to be in a position of leadership, but also knowing when it might be time to listen to someone else who has a different perspective on things. And another thing to think of is some people may not want to leave the structure. We don't really like change. So someone may not actually want to get posted to a new command. They may actually be quite happy where they are. Or someone else may not want the kind of valued set in command to leave them, and because they'd either have to train someone else or whatever, they just miss them. So again, you can either play that for comedy or drama where they might actually be sabotaging themselves or each other to make sure they don't leave. So it can be a very interesting kind of story there. And maybe in relation to that, are they able to do the things that the commanding officer can't? Like maybe they're putting themselves in different situations or dangerous situations that you wouldn't want the commanding officer, but you need someone with leadership skills there. Or maybe they actually are more active and able to do things that the commanding officer couldn't, but the commanding officer has wisdom and insight that they would need otherwise. So it's important to think about that. And speaking of abilities or so forth, it can come to the fact that they may have a complementary skill set, because then we aren't always masters of everything. So it's important to think about what skill sets we actually have, and do we have someone else who can fill the gaps or to accentuate what we have. So it can be an interesting thing where they actually play off of each other very well. And in another turn, are they able to act as an extension leader when they're not there? And I don't just mean just being a complete and total copy of the leaders. Again, that can be an interesting play as are they trying to be the leader? Are they going to be themselves? And so forth. Do they find this happy medium, or do they find out that yes, there are traits associated with leadership, but I need to do it my own way? So it's something you can really play with in a sense. But then they also need to be able to have the authority that people would listen to them even though the leader isn't there. And then sometimes you need to divide up the team to do different things, so you need leaders in both positions. But another thing is, are they a counselor to the leader? Do they offer a different point of view to give insight and advice in some ways? And again, this can be played with a bit because, again, we don't always have the perfect view. So if you aren't just having this character be like best at everything and always having that perfect view, if you want to make them more realistic, you have to give times where they might actually be wrong in both tenses. So then you might have a position where the leader is basically right on, but the commanding officer is just objecting and doesn't see things quite right. Or maybe they both don't see things quite right, and it's by coming together that they actually get the better perspective. Or you have times where the leader doesn't see things right, and it's the second in command who actually does have a better view of the situation. So it's important to kind of mix it up and not just have one character who's always right. But yet that's kind of all in the second command as a support, kind of like the second command we would want if we were the leader. But let's talk about why a second command might betray or mutiny against their leader. And there are probably two primary reasons in stories, at least. The first is ambition or their own goals or whatever. And so they may want the position that the leader has, and so when they see the opportunity, they are trying to abandon their leader and or backstab them or whatever. And the other turn is reason, where for whatever reason the leader has gone off the deep end and it's just time to bring things back into line and we need to do something quick, otherwise things are going to get really bad. Now the reason those might be come into play is that conflict can be a driving force in the story, either because of misunderstanding or having those different objectives as mentioned. So again, the thing is that it is a story thing. We like to have a bit of tension and drama. We like to watch it at least. We might not like it in our real lives, but we like to kind of observe it. So then it can be, and it gives sort of an interesting thing rather than just being slice of life. So in real life, we would rather the second in command would practice communication, both for those underneath them and those in leadership position over them. And leaders also need to be aware of having that communication. And is their second in command actually communicating with them? And do they actually have different ambitions and desires that may come into play when they least expect them? And in turn, a second in command story can also explore where the buck stops, or who bears the responsibility. Like, who is in charge of certain situations? Like, is the leader, full stop, the one who's responsible for every single person under their command? And will they take it all very personally on when there's a failing or whatever? Or is the second in command or even someone else in the chain of structure responsible for certain people? So it's kind of an interesting thing to really play through and think about in regards to leadership. But anyway, these are my thoughts on this. Why not share yours in the comments below? And if you enjoyed this video, you can like and share it so others may enjoy as well. Anyway, I'm Jonah, and you've been watching Lions Made Media, and we submit stories and lessons of them. Thank you for listening to my musings. Talk to you later, and have a great rest of your day.